So, hello and welcome. My name is Steve Pugh. I do something called the Growth Strategy Podcast here on the internet. And what we like to do is introduce you to interesting people that can help you with your business or career. I often pick people that I actually have some sort of link to, because for me, there's a rapport, there's like an authenticity to that as opposed to just interviewing random people. And then likewise, also on key sectors. So it'll often be on entrepreneurship, tech, education, and a few of those kind of things as well. And we also like to share people's stories, because I know I grew up before the internet, but likewise, it was often very difficult to learn from people and hear from people who have maybe done a career that you want to do or follow. But if you've never actually kind of done it or followed it yourself, how do you learn that kind of stuff? So I always like to dig into people's backstories as well. And hopefully if you join us for the next kind of 30, 40 minutes, it might be interesting, and this all gets clipped up and goes on to YouTube as well. So if you search for Roadmap MBA on YouTube, hopefully it'll pop up. So Patrycja, I've probably known for about 1.5 to 2 years now. We've worked together on a few different kind of projects as well, but I'm going to let her introduce herself. And if you have any questions or comments, drop them in the chat. It should pop up on my screen, and then hopefully I'll bring them in. So there we go. Hi, Patrycja. Everyone can now see you and hear you.
Hello. Hi, Steve. Thank you for inviting me, and hello, everyone.
No, it's a pleasure. This is actually my first one that I've done since July, which I think with any business, you can get into a cadence and you get into a rhythm and you just smash them out every week. But then one of the big projects that I've worked on this year was actually selling a company, and we completed it in July, and it just took over my life. And because of that, I took a break, which is the honest answer to it. But actually, I really enjoy doing these. And part of the reason I love to do them live is to have that interaction that often, and especially, I started these during COVID and I was stuck in my bedroom at home. And I love to both share other people's stories, but pick their brains and actually try and get the value out as well. So although I know you pretty well, for people that don't know you, how would you introduce yourself?
All right. Well, I'll try to be short here.
You don't have to be that short. You can take as long as you...
No. We'll be probably, people will get to know me through the conversation later on. But I would say I'm a business enthusiast, and my love affair with entrepreneurship and business became very early in my late teen years. I have a passion for technology and a knack for leadership, and that has led me to orchestrating startups, designing solutions for blue chip clients and tech companies, all while trying to understand how to and trying to help boost business by building networks and, kind of finding the right place in the ecosystems. And that's something that is something that I really value and always try to develop. So you can think of me as kind of a business navigator.
Because I think it was with, I might be wrong, but Startup Grind Newcastle, I think was the first time we met.
Yes.
And one of the things that I found, and I think it'll be true for a lot of people, but especially in a post-COVID world. And the reason why I say that is because a lot of us spent a lot of time on our own or online, where actually a lot of people will have met in the past 3 to 5 years online. I know we've met several times in person, but you get my point. Is almost that I think there's real value in, and we'll go on to this later, but startup accelerators and groups of people getting together to actually just talk about stuff and meet each other and hire each other and talk about issues and all those kind of things. Because although we all often have a skill set in a particular area, you don't know everything. And I'm the first person to kind of admit that. So although I know a lot about business and that kind of thing, I don't necessarily know a huge amount about startups, fundraising, tech stacks, that kind of thing. That actually that's when you can really plug and play and learn from other people's experience, which is a lot better way to do it than trying to figure it out yourself from scratch.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think that's something that we have in common. I mean, from very early years, I've realized that the power is sometimes in very accidental connections, very accident. Sometimes you meet someone you don't think it's going to be significant, and they just give you a little nudge. And you don't even recognize that as a huge push. It's just a little nudge. And it happened to me very early when I was going through some, difficult time as a teenager, not knowing where to go. And that probably pushed me into actually doing what I'm doing, into running a business. And sometimes the little nudges, you don't recognize them, or someone just connects you with someone else,
Hmm.
and it has a huge, it's a huge leap for you. So absolutely, I think building networks, being in communities, a lot is growing on communities. And like, I mean, I'm part of a startup grind community where we met. But I look at other organizations as or startups, a lot is actually built on communities. There is a
Yeah,
power in a group, and on your own it's never great. And even if you know much about the VC or
hmm,
startup, still you can learn so much from others. So yeah,
that's cool.
absolutely.
So one of the things I love to do is dig into people's backstories because I think it really helps flavor the character and give you a
Yeah.
feel for, who they are, what the background is, that kind of thing. So whereabouts did you grow up?
Well, I was born in Poland, in a small town of in Poland, in a house that was very much full of books. My parents, by profession, were teachers. My father was also an entrepreneur, but they were teachers by profession, and that I think shaped a lot of the. I mean, in a big way, it shaped the way I've been thinking for years, and it's probably still leaves the impact those roots. But a small town in Poland. Then I moved to a bigger
Hmm.
town, take up one studies. Then I moved to the north of Poland, where I studied and run companies. Then I moved to Warsaw. Then I moved to the UK. So kind of a nomad life.
Hmm.
But growing up, that's Poland. I think from early years I was very independent. I always had my opinion, if not to say that I was opinionated in some ways, and I had to learn to tame it. Sometimes it got me in trouble at school. Later on, something that I realized my daughter took after me. So that kind of, straight and direct approach of telling things that I believed in. Yeah, so Poland's kind of a academic family,
Hmm.
but also in an entrepreneurship environment.
Okay.
You know,
Because one of the things that I always like to try and spot common trends and themes between a lot of the people I speak to. And a lot of entrepreneurs, they're not afraid to challenge the status quo. In fact, you kind of have to. You will not be very successful in business if you just do the same as what everyone else does, because chances are somebody already does it. But I'm always interested in the common themes and traits which do run through a lot of people. That actually, I was the same in a lot of ways. I was for good academically, but I was also quite naughty, so the teachers would say. But
yeah.
one of the big things which kind of got me was that I wasn't picked up and that I was short-sighted until I was
Mm.
17, 18. I just thought it made sense that stuff further away got blurry. I thought that just made sense. Anyway, but what happened was that, so I was disruptive at school, not because I wanted to be disruptive, but because I couldn't see the board properly. And it was those kind of things of where, you always think, well, what if I would have been picked up earlier? Could I have done something else? But the truth is, a lot of that life experience helps build different types of character. And then, you might develop humor if you get bullied, and lots of different things can set you on that path, which can then, it's what makes everyone kind of unique as they
Mm.
kind of go through. So, what was your school life like? Did you enjoy it? Did you not enjoy it? Did you play any sports?
Um, I think I did enjoy that. I was that student with a nose in books for hours. So it wasn't about when I learn or when I've learned. It was about learning continuous, like continuous professional development we have right now.
Hmm.
And I believe in that. But I was a continuous learner at school. There was never an end. I could always read one more book on a subject. And then I was very tired and didn't remember. So I had my picks in terms of my favorite subjects, which was always art, anything artistic, anything more kind of language oriented, all the humanities.
Hmm.
And I hated maths. And my teacher convinced me that I'm terrible at maths. So that stayed with me, I think, for years. But I also was very entrepreneurial, even at school. So I was good at arts. My art projects were quite good.
Hmm.
So one day, I think at the age of 10 or 11, I took my friend from school and decided that we were going to sell our art at the local market. So 6 a.m., Tuesday, Thursday, we were there, both of us, making money, selling macrama. So, you can't, I think, once you find something like that in yourself, that kind of, it's a common pattern throughout your life. So the primary school, that was early years. And then at 17, I mean, I went to my secondary school was in a different town. I went to a private school. So I started commuting and very, very quickly kind of flew out of the nest, going to school, took up some other additional courses in schools on top of that. Very early, at I think age of 18, did like a 2-year journalist diploma, which was way too early, I think, for a secondary student. But all this kind of shapes you in a way that you are always hardworking. I mean, I simultaneously with the primary school, I was doing the primary music school,
Hmm.
which I hated, and I never played the piano. I never touched the piano later on once I graduated, but I did 8 years of
Wow.
music school. And I think what it trained me is perseverance, persistence, pain, because that was school when you could get beaten if you played bad notes, but trying and trying and trying. I don't play the piano nowadays, but I think it taught me a lot of things that help me, or
Hmm.
sometimes are actually obstacles on my way when I do things. Because, like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
nothing is ever ready, or perfectionism. This is something that I had to really fight.
But the thing is, it's I think it's those traits. So the same character traits which drove you to do piano, other than being hit with a stick,
Yes.
is so for me it was sports, but for different people it's different things. And it's that element of where you can always learn different things from different people, whether a piano teacher or a basketball coach or whichever. And for me, it's that's why I still coach basketball now. It's where it's helping to guide people on in life, is in as much as just basketball in some ways. So now I'm really with you. But you also started your first business quite young. Would you be happy to kind of talk us through that?
Yeah. Yeah, that was very, very early. I was 17, and it happened in a way, I think, by accident, um, and a coincidence. It was a language school. I was at that time still in that little town,
Hmm.
um, but taking tuition in a different city and commuting. I had the opportunity to visit a family in the UK for language schools, for summer schools.
Hmm.
So my language at the time, and we're talking early 90s in Poland, where you could be university diploma, language teacher, but never been to England, where I had that contact, and I had a huge love for England
Hmm.
and for the language. So my approach, I mean, I think I spoke quite fluently, but I loved the language. It was more about the culture, and I think
Yeah.
it was just visible in me. So I started having inquiries of, like, could you teach me? Could you help me? And that very quickly, within 2 weeks, absolutely by accident, grew into a more formal sort of curriculum-based school. I had a very good teacher who kind of, by observing, helped me navigate how to do that. And I don't know the moment when I realized that it could be a business, but I think, being myself and being trained with that stick over the piano and my fingers, I think um, I sort of took it very seriously, um, and at some stage realized that I'm good at it.
Hmm.
People bring more people. I think within 2 weeks we had 30 students, and
Wow.
then very quickly, when I was approaching to my sort of like equivalent of A-level exams in the UK, it was in Poland, mature exams. I already had a number of different groups
Yeah.
over the weekends and during the so that school was growing, and I started exploring the ways how I can perfect myself to actually deliver something better, because I realized that people were started flocking from normal language schools to that girl who just happens to be in love with the language. Um, but on a serious note, just when I traveled to study at the university, then I set up a formal sort of, a company, and then by accident, giving some extra language classes at the local other language school in that new city. Someone realized that, oh, she has some sort of a passion and a drive and is very ambitious. There is a contract coming from that was the NATO forces, from to train Polish army
Wow.
and Polish Navy. And I think that was long before my university diploma. I hired teachers. I won the tender, and that's when the serious business started.
Wow.
Ultimately, within 2 years, that turned into training half of the sort of northern region of Poland, both B2B clients
Hmm.
and B2C lessons, but army and police academy. So I was hiring teachers who had diplomas. I was still studying towards mine, and teaching as well. I think probably nowadays that would have not happened that easily for someone with no diploma. Back then it did. But I think I was very well organized, and I knew how to intuitively. I knew how to make sure that I continue keeping the contracts, and I kept the contracts for a number of
No,
years.
that's very cool. I think if that would have happened in the 2010s, you would have started a YouTube channel and you would have
Maybe.
been the Polish person teaching everyone English. But it's that element of where the irony is that in the 90s, we didn't necessarily have the internet. So you had to do it a different way. But almost
Yes.
as a grounding in entrepreneurship, you had the passion. You had something that a lot of other people didn't have. And the irony is, because you didn't have your diploma yet, a lot of the existing people would have followed just existing routes, that they would have thought, okay, I'll be taught and I will teach through the existing jobs. As well, you didn't have that. So you're like, well, I'll just go out and win the tender myself. But I think there's a whole mindset that you obviously had from school, from selling your paintings, but not everyone has that. And it's about the magic to spot the opportunity or the gap.
Yes.
I often talk to people. There's a former guest called Joanna Freely, and she runs a fabulous business called Trend Bible. And what they do is that they forecast where trends are going to go in 3, 4, 5 years' time. And they look at all of the weak signals and the strong signals in the market. And so she predicted the growth in vegan food like 10, 15 years ago. But what's really fascinating is to do that, you have to do higher order thinking. It's to be able to spot the gap. So you don't get given A, B, C, D. You spot A, B, and you have to be able to see where it's going to get to and then jump in before it happens. And not everyone has that talent, I think, which is, and it's a skill set that not everyone has, but it often is underappreciated in schools, if that makes sense. Because often school
Absolutely.
is built about, we teach you stuff, you tell us the same stuff back, and we grade it.
And that's the Polish school. That's the Polish school. I mean, we studied piles of books, and I didn't mind because I was the one reading. I mean, we had a huge library at home, but then the application of which you read, or the way that they wanted you to apply that in life, had no connection. I mean, I have a number of university diplomas. In the end, I did a number of those, a few BAs, MA, and then post MAs. And it does not really relate to what I do. But I think if you've got that entrepreneurship knack and kind of see that spots something, the opportunity you seek, and you know how to connect the dots, and the network is very important. I mean, I would not be able to deliver those contracts if I had not a very good network of people who helped me and worked for me. They had diplomas. In the end, I had a diploma towards the end of that, and we were delivering very excellent pass rate, 98% pass rate with
Wow.
NATO courses. If you don't deliver, they terminate the contract very quickly, and those are very intense. So that was a success. But equally, later on, I got pregnant. It was still when I was delivering the courses for the army. And I thought, like, well, I love my child to be bilingual, or at least
Hmm.
speak both languages fluently. But how you do that if you're in Poland, where they don't speak English now every day? Well, I had a English speaking community around me and quite a lot of native speakers. I, had books and everything in English, you name it, or video, stories for my future child. But I started thinking, like, okay, so how do I do that? Well, I need to set up a nursery that is with native speakers. There was nothing in Poland. I think there was one in Warsaw, and
So,
maybe one.
so
Yeah.
you wanted to teach your daughter English.
Yes,
So you
but there
actually,
was.
so you actually set up a nursery
I did.
to surround her with English speakers just to
I
teach her.
did. I took up a 2-year course at a university doing the research on bilingualism
That's
and,
crazy.
second language acquisition. At the back of it, I did a small sort of self-angel investment into that new business, still running the other business, rented the premises, did all the marketing, everything, hired the teachers. I think the biggest difficulty was to convince people that even a half-year-old, if it comes to a, nursery where you have people that speak English only, can start,
Hmm.
acquiring the language, not speaking the language, not understanding. But the children were playing. Obviously, yeah, all the children had more sort of organized tuition, so to say. I did set it up, and that was the start. After, I think, 2 years, I started getting inquiries from public institutions, public nurseries and preschools, to try and help them implement a better curriculum to teach the language, because they taught languages already, and like 4 to 3 to 5 years old. So they wanted to see where another approach could
Hmm. Hmm.
potentially boost what they were doing. So we, in a way, that little, the little accident in my life. I mean, well, not accident. My daughter would be upset, but that has led me to doing something on a bigger scale, not just my own sort of tuition center, but later on working with a number of public institutions, which
It's very
was
cool though,
also quite,
because
yeah.
it's because you need to combine the opportunity with the talent and the ambition. So you can have a lot of people have the talent and the ambition, but the opportunity never comes up. Or there's an opportunity there, but people don't even realize, or they do realize and they don't want to go for it. But it's funny, like you said at the start, it's when the stars align that things happen. Because I knew you had an ed tech background, but this goes back a long way, if that makes
Yes,
sense.
before tech.
Yes, yeah.
Before
Because
tech, that's long before tech.
I still find it funny that when you speak to young people nowadays, so the guys that I play basketball with are 18, 19, 20. If you were to show them a cassette tape, they wouldn't know what it was.
And we did this
With
to
the
listen.
pencil to ten, yeah.
Yes.
But it's just how the world has changed. But I think for the better. But one of the things that really kind of comes across is that you obviously have a passion for teaching and entrepreneurship, but education, as a whole. Why do you feel that that's important to you?
Like I said, I came from a home where books were present, where my father used to, even when he was an entrepreneur, I remember briefly, but my mother actually recently reminded me, he used to, as a business person, travel with his colleague to different villages in the region to give talks on how to run a business, inspire people. So something like we do with Startup Grind, but it wasn't Startup Grind, it was in Poland in 80s, maybe
Hmm.
80s, because then we had accident, and my father died, but
Oh, wow.
so 92, but in the 80s. So he was going and had those lectures to educate people and inspire them, more inspire than
Mm.
educate. And I think that's one thing. But very quickly, I realized that I could set up the business without schools, and I did it correctly. As long as you're very inquisitive, open, and you're daring, you dare to jump, because it may not work, and believe in yourself. At the same time, I did a lot of diplomas and then realized, like, this is all detached. This doesn't make sense. My daughter, and I don't think she will be angry for me for saying that. I mean, she got D's in her business studies. She excels in business right now. She's 22, and she's great at marketing. She has her own
But the
side
way it
gigs.
was taught and packaged,
It was absolutely, yes. And I mean, I spent 10 years, around 10 years, also as an academic teacher at university. So I knew that from the backstage also what it looks at the back. And I thought, like, okay, well, I'm pro education,
Mhm.
but whatever you take, whether it's formally, informal, if it pushes you, that's great. A lot of people have great ideas, don't have the education. Sometimes they have the education, they lack ideas. You have to connect the dots. And very quickly, I thought that if I can do something to help them and inspire, sharing my stories, but my story is full of actually failures as well. I
So is
mean, I
mine.
was 27, I think, or 26 when one of the businesses, I had 3 businesses with my partner at the time, and one of them just went poof within days. Took me 2 years to put it together. And, this is actually a huge success, I would say. It was a failure, but it's not a failure. It's when you learn the most, how far you can really go. And, sharing this, but also once you build that network, opening that network and possibilities, just helping people to find the connection,
Mhm.
connecting the dot. They sometimes don't see it, but you see it for them. It's not always, that all those connections work, but the best ones will ignite. And I think this is what led me when I came to UK, after, because after the nursery, I traveled to Warsaw. I ran some bigger businesses there, and then came to the UK, where I set up the companies that I run right now, which is Open Solutions and a Business Academy. And London Business Academy was sort of an idea for helping entrepreneurs exceed and excel and be better, and more kind of a powerful network. And with NatWest for a number of years, we run a number of events, very much like Startup Grind, but more for more
Mhm.
kind of scale up companies. And then when I moved to the north for my short sort of stay in the north where we met, I just thought that ecosystems, and London is full of different, organizations, but I felt like ecosystems would benefit from something from outside. But
Mhm.
at the same time, entrepreneurs, even if they already know that I'd like to do something, they need to be sometimes helped, inspired, or opportunities thrown into them. And sometimes people's at school, they also need a bit of a guidance, showing them, like, forget what you learned at business studies. You have the idea. You can start step by step from
Yeah.
here, from A to B to C. So yeah, if it makes sense, that's where I realized that I do have a passion for helping people. I'd like to think that there is some impact
Mhm.
in what I do, because I do spend quite a lot of time on that. It's
But
like a
you
full-time
know, but
job.
I guess we all do it. It's how you choose what your career is. That so one of my big things, as you know, is that it's helping people from underprivileged and underrepresented backgrounds,
Yeah.
because as I've gone through my career, you see that the more money you get, the bigger your network is, the more you can afford different things and opportunities increase.
Yeah.
But to fight out from lower down, where you don't have the network, you can't afford the course, you don't have the grades to get into university, you can't get the job because you can't just ask your dad's friend to. It's tough, and that's a big thing for me that I really kind of resonate with the story. But also, what you've proved and what I'm trying to prove is almost the fact that one person or a small group can actually facilitate change to really make a difference, and that's the big thing. But you are right that the networks and the things really kind of help.
Yes.
No, cool. So, would you be happy to almost tell people about the kind of thing that you do now?
Yes. Well, I wear a couple of hats, but basically my majority or well, all I do is around startups and scale ups and it's working with businesses. In the past, I did support organizations at different sizes, from startups that were my own to blue chip clients where I delivered solutions, reviewing processes and designing the processes to improve the way they work internally or sometimes externally for clients like BMW, Scania. So they were long year projects. And they were great, but then working with sort of mid-sized companies and leading companies, and it kind of gave me a taste of everything, from a startup, my own, like a nursery where I built a team of 5 or 6 people, to a company that I managed in Warsaw with probably around 300 to 400
Wow.
people. So, you get the taste of everything and you think like, what do I enjoy most? And that was helping, I would say, not well, I do work with the very, very early stage, almost idea stage, more on a mentor sort of basis, the accelerators, etc. But my main work involves MVP
Hmm.
plus
Hmm.
scale up stage startups. I do have a sweet spot for tech. I love tech, and right now the focus is very much on tech. I started obviously because of my background. A lot of projects years back when I set up my company was very much around, training companies, growing and scaling education companies. So by scaling, it's a 360-degree review. You're looking inside the business, outside, what they need to do
Hmm.
to scale. And that very often, involved looking at the processes internally and, okay, well, you cannot run that on an Excel spreadsheet. You cannot do that this way or that way. We need to put the infrastructure, and usually tech goes behind that. You're not getting clients your competitors are getting, but you're still using Microsoft, and no offense to Microsoft, but that's not the only thing you rely on in business. So then very quickly I realized that I'd like to get wider than that. And I started getting inquiries from businesses from abroad,
Hmm.
very often tech businesses that needed that network effect here and a bit of a guidance in terms of how to navigate a foreign market, how to expand here, but also someone who very well understands the business relations and their business inside out. And that's what I started doing with a small team of associates. So my work right now very much revolves around helping businesses
Hmm.
expand, scale, either within the UK or into the UK or into the US, connecting them with the investors. What started more as a consultancy business, right now I call it a venture scaler. So it's much more hands-on approach
Hmm.
and a slightly different model. But on top of that, a lot what I do goes around Startup Grind, which is my pro bono role, and currently three chapters
Hmm.
across the UK, and including London, which is a big one, to in the Northeast, and it's helping the ecosystems to be well connected with that global ecosystem of Startup Grind, running events, hopefully inspiring some people, helping them on the way. And I think even if helping them to fail
Hmm.
earlier, this is
Yeah,
also
yeah.
good, because their next business might actually be very successful. So you know like I said, failure is not ultimate.
Because it was at the event, I forget when it was, but we had Anthony Rose. It was on a Saturday, came up to Newcastle. So he was a guest on the podcast about 6 months ago. But I would never have met him in person if I didn't go to the event. And the point I made to him was that he must have really wanted to come, because if you don't know, he's a really successful guy. on a Saturday
Absolutely.
in his own time to come to speak to a room of 30, 40 people. But for me, it was fascinating because like one of my talents is the ability to read and learn information. And there's a huge difference though between reading the top 5 recommended books on venture capitalism and raising
Mhm.
money, fundraising,
Yeah.
and actually talking to people. And I had a call earlier today with a partner in a VC firm, and it's fascinating to learn from different people. And the reason why I wanted to bring that up is because you've been around tech a fairly long time, but actually it's how it's changed. And I'll let you describe, I'll kind of salt the pot a little bit. But it's almost where we had the internet boom in the 90s. Then there was the dot-com crash, early 2000s.
Mm.
Then there was a huge boom up until 2008, 2009. Then the world ended, my big market crash. But then there was 14 years or so of just prosperity and almost interest-free capital. And just, it was apparently, I was too late for it, but it was so easy to raise money. And then now that's gone again. But what my point is that although the rules for tech and fundraising have probably changed 7 times since 96, and it's almost as someone that has been through some of that, a lot of that, how have you seen it, how tech has changed in the past 20 years?
Oh my God. So I spent this past week has been absolutely incredible for me. I had the opportunity, thanks to Startup Grind actually, because that was a very expensive and a great event to be at Cogix in London, AI focused event, and among many sessions and so many people that I met, like from States, from New Zealand, people that I always wanted from with big companies that I wanted to hear and hear their voices, their opinions. So I had the opportunity, but among them there was Stephen Fry.
Oh,
And
wow.
Stephen Fry said something, and I mean, that was a chef's kiss, his talk. Maybe, among the really focused techpreneurs, he was slightly different, but he was actually looking at, more kind of a human aspects of tech and where it leads us. Is there a hope for us? And one thing he said was very obvious, but we keep forgetting. And I always said that, technology accelerates very quickly, but leadership, education don't always follow that quickly. What Stephen said was like technology is not a noun, it's a verb. It always,
Changes.
moves.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a great way of looking at it. So over the last 20 years, I mean, my daughter is 22. So I remember before she was born, at that time I was also one part of my business was translation, interpreting, reviewing documents. I remember one of the first projects, communications review for Scania, was typing on an electric typewriter or sometimes on a computer that's not, I mean, to connect to internet was making those noises, So everything was slow and my shelves were falling under the heaviness of dictionaries. I remember taking my, exam to be a certified translator. We already were using, internet and at that time there were, I think, like online dictionaries or on a hard disk, I think, maybe not on Google, like open source, but we had to take physical dictionaries into like books, heavy
Mm-hmm.
books to the exam. So that has changed. It's 20 years. It's like nothing. I still think like, oh, I'm still 20 something. And then I realized like, no, actually my daughter is 20 something. But the way the world has changed within that time is much quicker, and it's quicker and quicker year after year. I mean, we started discovering ChatGPT months
7
ago,
months
maybe
ago,
a
yeah.
year ago. Yes, absolutely. And right now, what it can do, and how many other developments within AI you have, and it's not just AI. Or we were talking about Web3 blockchain 2 years ago, and
Mm-hmm.
those things are business models are changing, the way we work as people, everything. So yes, absolutely. I think it's it's a great time to live and to operate, to run a business in, but it also means that, you know, you cannot stop learning. You have to be really up to speed with that, because if you don't, and you don't have to be, I mean, I don't have a tech background. I have a sweet spot for tech, but I learn, and I have to learn.
Hmm.
Because if I work with a company that is in deep tech and they do something like, you know, it can be computational modeling, it can be IoT systems, whatever it is, they have solutions. In order for me to understand how can we
Hmm.
expand, how to find the marketplace for that business, it's actually try and understand what they're doing as well. So that's one aspect. But the other aspect, you know, for any business owner is like how you set up your business to be really, how can you use what AI tools you can use to speed things up. You know, right now, I mean, since I started using ChatGPT, it's like it's my marketing assistant, it's my brand assistant. It's becoming, you know, and in so many ways you can do that. But obviously, you have to have a healthy approach to that.
Because I think the one constant is that you give a few different examples of how tech and tech trends, and so the big hype 6 months ago was AI. Like it's still a big thing, but actually
Yeah.
some of um, because I watch Bloomberg quite a lot, and some of
Yeah.
the companies that raised a ton of money aren't doing as well as they hoped, and then people now start to question: is it a bubble? Is it not? But the point is, you have the tech is to facilitate the human part of the chain. So the part of the chat that I had this morning is that, so I've run I know you know, but it's an ed tech company called Roadmap, but it's about making business education accessible. And whilst there are tens of thousands of multi-billion pound business education companies, they're largely aimed at rich white people in Western nations. And there's a huge blue ocean that half the world lives off less than $6 a day. I'm trying to figure out where's the space where everyone else is looking over there to do that. So part of one of my recent diagnostics for the startup program was on that I'm fairly technology light. But
Yes.
you could argue that that's a positive because I can continue to pivot and change to find my niche. As where one of my big things is that, so I also in theory compete with universities, but universities literally have £600 million worth of assets, and that's just Newcastle. But if you have the sunken cost fallacy where you've invested in £600 million worth of physical buildings and 6,000 staff, you might actually, from a business point of view, pivot and use AI to deliver a better service, cheaper, etc. But you'll probably resist until you're forced to because of the prior investment. And I think that's the real difference, is that I'm trying to wait and watch based on how AI is. Well, it only launched realistically in February, March. We're in September now. That I know it's going to just destroy everything and create something new. But that's a difficult, it's a difficult change for people that have invested a lot in the old tech, but it's also a huge opportunity for people like me and others to utilize the haven't spent £6 billion on stuff that they don't need anymore. And that's for me where tech's really interesting, is because it keeps evolving. Change creates opportunity, and I think that's the really exciting thing, to try and just figure out, okay, what could I do, how could it work. The other flip side with tech though is that it's the inverse power law. So it's the fact that you might have 10,000 great companies, but one of them's going to win and win really big, and the other
Mm.
9,900 are going to do okay, and there's some in the middle, and it's either all or nothing. As Peter Thiel says, it's the race to one. It's 0 to 1. How do you win? And that's something I struggle with sometimes, because it's almost where I'm trying to look through it through objective glasses to say, well, actually, if I know I can't, or I'm less likely to win, be that one, do I want to do that, or do I want to find the space where I could win? And that's where the kind of the mentorship and the networks come good, to
Yeah.
just find that niche that you have to do, which I think is quite cool. I was going to ask you about AI, but I think we've kind of covered it. Is there anything just about the topic of AI that you haven't covered so far, or where do you think it's going to go in 10 years' time?
Oh, well, I'm not an expert. I wouldn't be able to guess. I think it won't be stopped. I think one of the things, and that's again, that event that I just got through. So many different views, so many people that are very, very active and very deep in AI space. And the whole event was very much reflecting on where is it going, where is it heading. So if they are asking the question, I think I'm probably not in a position to answer that. I think it won't be stopped. I think it will be a growing, and the development on the AGI. That's something that's will probably be happening maybe in companies in collaboration,
Hmm.
and it's gonna continue. um and well, I can't wait to read, and maybe I'll be able to answer that question, but that won't be my opinion, but maybe that will help to shape. I started reading Mustafa Suleyman's book, the Wave, and that's probably where maybe I'll find some more answers. But yeah, I think that's nothing that we can stop it, and it's probably where we can dig a lot of goods. At the same time, it's like opening that Pandora's box, and a lot of scary things might jump out.
Because for me personally, the way that, so I also went to an EdTech AI event, and it was at Newcastle University, and it was 3 months ago. And what was fascinating in the room was you had a range of speakers and experts, and a lot of them were saying, well, you can use AI to help you write curriculums and to make your life easier as a teacher. And whilst that is all absolutely true, they were also saying, well, actually, what you could do is if you have 100 different students, for each different student, they would have an assistant, and the assistant tailored to them, for instance, in the example of your daughter with business, they will be able to tailor the perfect business education at the right level to feed them stuff that they thrive on, and it's there 24 hours a day to help them. And won't this make teachers' lives easy? And we fast forwarded through, and I said, well, I believe them, but why then do you need the university and or the school in its traditional current form? Because if you're going to have your virtual best friend, it could even be a hologram. And we've both seen Apple's new headset, which looks incredible. But with augmented reality, you could have it on, and it's like just talking to someone. They could be your best friend, but actually, they could also be the most wise person in the world. They can teach you philosophy and engineering and law, and they'll always tailor it perfect to you. But my point being that I can actually see the entire education system being completely revolutionized. That
Yes.
where I hope it goes to is that universities go back to what they were 500 years ago, where it's creative spaces for people who have similar passions to go and talk in person,
Mhm.
rather than £60,000 worth of debt to teach you a curriculum that won't necessarily help you in the real world. But I can see that happening, and that's not a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. But it was almost what I found interesting on the topic was that people wanted to extrapolate the concept of AI whilst it suited them, and not
Mhm.
keep going to the point of where, ooh, I might be out of a job in 30 years. You would just pivot and change jobs. But you get my point. It's a really fascinating time to be alive, I guess.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the out of job question was going throughout the whole event, and I think the point there, and the point that I heard earlier, and I believe that's true. It's like where there was the invention of cars. Yes, well, horses are well enjoying a great life somewhere else, and I think the thing is that people doing those jobs that may be endangered, automatic sort of jobs, or anything that is easy, they their jobs will evolve.
Hmm.
And that's one thing. So it's not necessarily losing the job. It might be evolving into something different. And what you mentioned about the curriculum and students studying, I remember speaking to someone working at the university as a PhD researcher in AI some time ago, and what they were doing is actually training AI in a pair, like you're studying with a student with student, what they were pairing a student with an AI bot to study the same curriculum and see what happens,
Ah,
how that involves taking the same exams, taking the same case studies and working on them. So an AI and a student together. So I'd be very keen to see how that progresses and where that takes us. And one of the things that actually Stephen showed us at his talk was where AI is taking, because we are talking about, well, write a curriculum, but it's way more than that if you look. And he played a piece of he often reads for
hmm
documentaries, and that was I think a documentary around Nazis in Denmark or Netherlands, and he showed a piece and said, like, well, that was me reading, so have a listen, and then I'll show you the AI version of it. And it stopped. And he said, well, actually, that was the AI version, which I was not aware. And was basically, stealing of, well, in a way, his IP. And then the question during the next session is like, well, how can we protect ourselves from using our face, from using our, because what you can do with AR in terms of stealing the identity, fraud, and the deep fake
Well,
is huge. And one of the questions was like, what can we do? And I genuinely thought, like, well, could Stephen Fry sue the filmmakers? And apparently not, unless you create your identity sort of, and
hmm
you put an IP
hmm
on that identity with the voice and everything. So it's a way of protecting your voice, your face. But as a human,
yeah.
you're not able to say, like, well, you use my face for something, or you use my voice, and I like to see you. So loads of ways. And here is just what AI can mean to you as a person. And apparently actors or famous people already have that in place.
hmm
So maybe Stephen or Patricia don't need that, or we can't afford that yet. It's not so
I have
rich.
actually looked at it. I've looked at how, because I do a lot of online videos, but where you could create a digital avatar of you.
Yes.
And I have looked at, because I only speak English, but one of the big issues I have as a business is language translation, because most of the world doesn't speak English or not as their first language. But I can see it just incredible things where I think the issue you will have, and we're already kind of there, is that people will just lose trust in everything. Because actually, in the Russia-Ukraine war, very cleverly, someone broadcasted a deep fake Putin on Russian TV saying, I think it was Ukraine had won the war or give up. But the point is, this is real. That's like something out of a film. And that
Yes.
actually, and it's on,
Yes.
I think we're going to go through a period where people either lose trust in the media unless it's watermarked as being real.
Yes. Yeah. Watermarks, and one of the points was, the worse will be different. You won't need power, or you won't need weapon, or your weapon will be the AI.
Yeah.
And then so it's absolutely a different sort of shift in terms of the power, and what you can do with it, and what type of AI you have. And if you think of Russia or China, and then
I
you
think
look
for
at
me,
how we are talking about being ethical.
yeah,
um,
because that's the big thing, is that I think what will happen is often it's when multiple technologies combine. So quantum computing is getting close to being, regular day-to-day viable. One of my
yeah.
former guests was a guy called Craig Fenton that runs Google in Europe. And this was 2 years ago, but almost it's close. And the code breaking ability of quantum computers is off the charts compared to regular computers. But you combine that power with AI to iterate. The point is, you might have well-meaning actors with regulation that follow the rules. But if you have someone with a self-interest that doesn't follow the rules, they could just take over the world.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
I think we'll end the scary conversation there. But the point is, it's fascinating. And what I look forward to is that when I'm 85, I'll get to look back from my hologram and rewatch this conversation and see how we're all incredibly wrong. And actually, it was all fine. What's your big dream for the future? Obviously, you've talked about this incredible career and the stuff that you've done with tech. And then I know your daughter now works in tech and you work with loads of really cool people. What's your big dream for the future?
Well, I don't think I'm nowhere near fulfilling my dream. Uh, I think I'd like to, you mentioned like when you're 85, you rewatch the conversation. I would like to rewind kind of like, if I'm 85, if I manage to be one day, to look back and think like, all right, well, what I did was it's not about money. I think it's never been for me. It's about, doing something that makes me feel good, makes me feel accomplished. And usually I feel accomplished when I see the impact of little things that I've done. So looking at this, and I once, and speaking again of the age 85, I once met, I think 20 years ago. It was when I had my I co-run a sailing business. So we were on boats, and a boat next to us was a beautiful yacht from the States. And then two people on that huge boat emerged, both in their late 80s, with all the technology on the boat that you could have at 20 years ago, and faxes and everything. So they were still sort of like
Mm-hmm.
attached to their life in New York and their business that were probably exiting or just having as founders, and someone was running for them, and at the same time being free. So I think my kind of a dream for the future would be to really have that accomplishment feeling, but at the same time a huge feeling of freedom, not detached to a certain place, not
Mm-hmm.
detached to a certain have the freedom of choice where I am, with whom, what I do. I don't feel that I will ever retire because I love what I do, but have that boat sail across the seas, and but have the, and that's the bit where I need technology, be connected with,
Get a Starlink, you'll be fine.
I'm navigating from the board. I think that's something that I would love to do,
Oh, that's
like
cool.
80 plus, maybe. Yes, I love sailing. I'd love to go back on the water and not retire, but have my sort of semi-retirement.
I've got you. It's funny though, because I think COVID, and just the sad fact is that as you get older, people get sick and you have more family die and that kind of thing. And I think we personally, it was one of the things we did on holiday last week, was it's to reassess life priorities. That if you would have asked me 20 years ago, it was about escaping something, of achievement, feeling that I'd achieved something, and almost public recognition that, okay, he's done okay. So for me, ironically, that getting the managing director job title at 33 was a big one for me, because it was something I never thought I'd ever do. And then that morphed into the social impact startup and the stuff that I'm doing now. And whether it fails or not, I feel I've tried my best. So I'm content with that. But then now it's starting to look at, well, actually, what do I want to do with my life? What things do I enjoy? Who do I like to spend my time with? And it's got nothing to do with making money. But actually, I think that's the real beauty of tech, is the ability to give people options to really kind of build something. And I think that's kind of quite nice. So towards the end of each interview, I have a series of kind of set questions. These have their own section on YouTube, which I like to kind of link back. Would you be happy to share the best piece of advice you've ever had?
So the best piece of advice. Whoa. Okay. I think, well, the one from my father. Always speak the truth and seek the truth.
No.
And that's very, succinctly said, but I think that works very well. Seek the truth.
Can I ask, when was your father born?
Poland.
No,
When?
when?
48, I think.
Okay, because the reason why I think that's even more poignant is that he lived through a more turbulent time.
Yes.
That I think now, in some ways, that we have the internet, that I think the truth is easier, more likely to get out than it did in 1948 or the 70s or the 80s. But I think it's still very true, and it goes back to the deepfake AI conversation of
Yes. Yes, and seek the truth. I think maybe we can look at it as the real meaning of things. Look deeper. I would interpret that this way. Be inquisitive. Don't take things for what they look on the surface,
yeah, yeah.
or people, or so kind of at the same time, yes, speak the truth and be genuine. And I think, yeah, so that's one, that's the one I kind of, it stayed with me. Yeah,
No,
and
I
I
think it's
think,
cool. I think it's good. If you were to give advice to your younger self, and you could pick, you at school, you could pick the 10-year-old selling their artwork, you could pick the first business, you could pick the second business, you could pick yourself 6 months ago.
yeah.
If you were to give advice to your younger self, what would it be?
Okay, my younger self. If I was giving advice to a younger self in sort of like finishing school, starting my first business, have more faith in yourself and trust what you're doing. Because I was doing all those jumps, but I had an imposter syndrome. I always felt like if you put me on a basketball field and told me, Patrycja, play basketball, I mean, I was the first one like, I'm not playing, because I did not feel it was my thing.
Okay.
So with business, I'm more daring, but still. And then I think if I look at myself later on in later years, look at which battles to fight and which to just give up.
Okay, no, it's good. It's good. Is there anything you would like to talk about and plug before we go?
Well,
Where can people find you on social media? Is the other
where,
easy?
where they can find me? Oh, right. Well, that's LinkedIn, Twitter. Maybe not so active since Twitter changed into X. It's probably I'm not as active there, but I think LinkedIn is my sort of primarily
No.
social media. Facebook, no. I gave up on Facebook years ago.
Out of interest, because it relates to tech, why
Yeah.
did you give up on Facebook?
It's changed. It changed drastically. So I was one of the very first wave of users of Facebook, not the very first one, because obviously you had to study at a certain university to be there. But then very quickly, I took up a project at Queen Mary in London. I was still in Poland, and that's how they invited, before anyone was using Facebook in Poland, someone at that time, you had to be invited. Someone invited me as part of the project before I came to London, was meet the team. And I don't remember the year, but it was just after they released that to wider audience. And then it changed very much. And I also feel that I changed my audience or my friends. My friends are not necessarily on Facebook, and if they are, I can meet them elsewhere. But my business sort of connections audience, where I give most focus on, is LinkedIn. I think Facebook has a slightly different taste. So
But
yeah.
I agree. So I was at university when it first launched. And this is a true story. So I remember at the time MySpace was a thing.
Oh
And
yeah.
someone convinced me to create a MySpace page. And also thank you, Jonathan, for nice words. So I created a MySpace page, spent about 2 days on it. Then someone told me about Facebook.
Yeah.
And I never went back to MySpace. But the big
Yeah.
difference, I think, it's as they grew and they started to commercialize more. I now don't use it, but also I've whittled right down to 65 people. There was at one point with hundreds, and that's
Yeah.
because my sports team uses it and different things. But the point is, you can see how a huge tech giant booms, but then through the competitive forces of the market, where they're forced to make money and they make decisions, or Elon Musk with X and Twitter,
Yes.
you
And
can
it
see them
changes.
going off. That yes, okay, they use WhatsApp, and I still use WhatsApp because it's not brilliant, but it kind of works, and it's But I think you will get constant change of platforms, but the one constant is still the human interaction. That I think as you get older, I care more about a fewer number of people, but I also
But
care less about what other people think, so I don't share it.
yes, absolutely. And I think it's a great point, the human interaction. So yes, my social media platform of choice is LinkedIn, Twitter less. But then I think that community outside of social media, and connecting with the people that I sometimes met on social media, or we meet from
In
event to
real
event.
life.
Was the business academy in the past, or right now that's the startup grind in real life. But that's not the network you meet every day, but it's still your network. They are somewhere sitting on your sort of platform. And it's all about making more than just a connection, I think. And yes, not quantity. I mean, my inner circle is very tight. But outside of that, the business circle is really trying to. And when I was younger, I was trying to be cool and please everyone. And right now, I think I'm more and more every day discovering, like, I don't give a.
Yeah.
I'm this. Either you like me or not. As long as I don't hurt anyone, that's fine. That's cool.
But I
So
think that's where the magic is and will be for the next 10, 20 years. And it's almost, so a tech platform might amplify that or give you a space. But what sits behind that is the human interaction and relationships. And that's what I think is where a lot of the education will come from, but the networks will come from, and almost where the opportunity is. And it's just fascinating because in both of our tech lifetimes, we've seen huge people grow and fail. And that will continue to happen. It will always happen. But I think that the ability to learn, iterate, fail, start again, it's that resilience. It's you at the piano. Everyone gets hit with the stick every so often. That actually, it's the passion to just keep going. I think is really special. Patrycja, I've really enjoyed today. And obviously, we've known each other for quite a long time, but there was so much stuff that I just didn't know. And I think what's really fascinating is part of the reason why I love long form content is you get to dig a bit deeper and learn the kind of stuff that you would never learn in a LinkedIn post. But actually, when you do get to know more about, for me, the guests, but for other people when they get to know you, there'll be people that really resonate with your story. And I certainly have a lot more respect for your journey than I did. And I already had respect, but now I know the background, I know more of the depth. And for me, there's something special in that. But anyway, but no, thank you for your time today. I've really enjoyed it. For anyone else that watches this, will all get clipped up and go onto YouTube. You can add Patrycja on LinkedIn. I'll link all the stuff in the comments. Thank you for your time, Patrycja, and have a wonderful rest of your Monday.
Thank you very much, Stephen. It's been a pleasure. Really enjoyed.
Good, cool.
And well, thank you, everyone. I hope that inspires a bit, or sharing the story.
Cool. Well, I will speak to you soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.